upon a time it was Arnold Rothkopf, and I was a student first at Yeshiva Salanta, then at Talmudical Academy, and afterwards at Yeshiva College, where I went on to get my smicher and to do graduate work as well in Bernard Revel. I had the privilege that in the middle of my college years, I was awarded, I would call it a fellowship. I became what is known as a Gottesman fellow, or the recipient of a Gottesman scholarship. I have in front of me, I actually was able to find the original letter from Dr. Shmuel Belkin, informing me, dear Mr. Rothkopf, I have just been advised by Mr. Herman Gottesman that you have been selected as one of the recipients of his Gottesman scholarship in the amount of $500 per year. I therefore wish to take this opportunity to congratulate you, and I am confident that you will continue the high scholastic achievement which you have displayed in the past. And it's signed by Samuel Belkin, President. Of course, at the time, I really didn't know that much about Mr. Mendel Gottesman, although we all knew as yeshiva students the Gottesman Library. But as time went on and I did my doctorate and my research and postdoctoral research, the name Mr. Mendel Gottesman becomes very well known and tangible to me. And I want to bring you back with a little history. This is the 4th edition of my initial book, my first book, based upon my doctorate on the founder of Yeshiva and Yeshiva College, Harav Dr. Bernard or Dov Revel. And if I can quote to you from page 76, here Rabbi Revel has these magnificent plans. He announces a multi-million-dollar drive to build a new campus for Yeshiva and Yeshiva College, which of course later will become Yeshiva University. Everyone is laughing at him. They viewed Orthodox Jews, East European Jews, that being their origin basically, Lo Yitzlach Mikim. These people are greenhorns, have just come to America, barely speak the language, and they're going to build a multi-million-dollar structure. And it was 3 great individuals who gave Rabbi Revel the support he needed. Their names have been immortalized in the Yeshiva building, the main academic center as they call it today. There is, of course, the official base medrash, the Lamport Auditorium, and everyone knows about the Gottesman Library. What we don't realize was that these people who pledged extravagant sums, ultimately each one gave 100,000, another 100,000, and more. It put Yeshiva on the map. And I quote to you the editorial in the New York Times on December 26, 1924. American jury seems to have been skeptical of the ability of Orthodox Jewry to raise the millions necessary to build the proposed yeshiva and college on 3 city blocks in New York. Orthodox Jews have never before raised such an amount for so stupendous an undertaking, and no such ambitious project has ever before been attempted on behalf of any educational institution. And it goes on and it describes the fundraising dinner that was held celebrating Hanukkah, and the commitments that were made by individuals such as Mr. Gottesman. And at that moment, even the New York Times had to raise its eyebrows and started to understand that Torah is here to stay in the Western world. And as they say, the rest is history. Now, who was Mr. Gottesman? Talk about an individual, his years, Menachem, known as Mendel HaKohen Gottesman, 1859 to 1942, born in Munkach, Hungary, a man who comes to America and succeeds beyond all expectations, but remains a wonderful, pious, committed, and thinking Jew. I want to cite my Rebbe, Mori Rebbe Harav Soloveitchik, in my second volume on the Rav. I have, those of you familiar with this work, it's basically, besides a biographical monograph, it quotes the Rav as he spoke, translated from the Yiddish into English. The English obviously did not need translation, but it's the Rav speaking on his own. On page 80 of volume 2, I cite a talk the Rav gave in honor of a more contemporary person who did so much for the yeshiva, Mr. Joseph Griss. But this talk on Mr. Joseph Griss, which was given in 1979, it's very unique. It applies to all the great lay people who helped build Torah. In my humble opinion, this is probably the first time a giant of Torah like Rabbi Soloveitchik, Mori Rebbe, discusses not just Gedolei Yisrael, Ramdonim Muvhakim, great scholars, but a lay person. What is a Jewish balabas? The word balabas, a very intriguing, interesting word. And the Rav speaks in terms of balabatim. The practical tradition can be traced back to antiquity. If you ask me who was the first Jewish balabas in history, in the Bible, I will tell you Yosef. And he speaks about Joseph at Tzaddik and other balabatim, their commitment, their overwhelming insight, their worry for the future. The Jews, the Torah people, should have a future. And I quote the Rav now on page 83, and every syllable applies to Mr. Mendel Gottesman. I believe that the Jewish Balabayat distinguished himself with 3 characteristic traits or capabilities. First of all, the Balabayat possessed a sense of unlimited responsibility. He had a clear awareness of what the Talmud states in Shvuah 39a. All of Israel are sureties, one for another. We are a raven, interlocked, one for the other. A balabas had a deep feeling not only for himself and his family, but also for the greater Jewish community. And not only for the Jewish community in his town, but for the entire Jewish community throughout the world. He not only had the sense of responsibility, but he discharged its demands in dignity. Second, the Balabayat possessed a tough and pragmatic mind. He also thought in strictly utilitarian and practical categories. He also had a capability for decision-making and an unlimited capacity for implementing his decisions. Without these traits, the Balabatim would not have achieved prominence. And then there's a third trait which particularly applies to Mr. Mendel Gottesman. Third, and this may sound nonsensical and absurd, they possess not only a tough mind, but a sensitive heart. Can a person be both at the same time? It seems illogical. Psychologically, I do not know if it is possible or not. It is difficult to be a dreamer. Yet the Balabayat succeeded in having a utilitarian mind and a practical approach to the world, and at the same time was a visionary looking up to the stars. They combined the thesis and the antithesis. Sometimes this thesis and antithesis forged a synthesis in their personality It was a dialectical personality, opposites combined into one. And I think this is a magnificent description of Mr. Mendel Gottesman. We know he was a successful businessman. We see the amount of money that he was able to give to charity. His charity lives on until today. He founded the Gottesman Tree of Life Foundation. But much more than that. Look at the ethical will of Mendel Gottesman, dated August 16, 1921, where he speaks to his children, and you'll see the spirituality. For man doth not live by bread alone, but everything that proceeded out of the mouth of the Lord does man live. Quoting the pasuk, Lo halalechem levado yichyeh adam. I deem it my duty to you, dear children, not only to leave you my material goods, but also to bequeath to you, by way of spiritual endowment, my injunctions as to the manner in which you should order your lives in feeling, thought, and conduct, to the end that you may prosper in all your undertakings and live truly happy, successful lives as Jews. And let me just quote part of this magnificent document. I came to this blessed country of opportunity at the age of 29 years. I had my trials, struggles, disappointments, at times and difficulty, but I was always borne up by faith and trust in the Almighty, and my trust was justified. Most important, he continues a few pages later, and you shall teach the Torah diligently unto your children. Always remember the words of the sages. Kol hashoneh halachot b'chol yom muftaklo shuhu ben olam haba. He who learns dinim daily is assured of immortal life. And as I've frequently explained to you, Olam Haba does not necessarily mean the celestial world, but also your future here on earth from day to day. Of course, those who are engaged in the active life of emergent do not have sufficient leisure and mental freedom necessary for him who wishes to become a great scholar in any department of our profound Torah, which is longer than the earth, more spacious and broader than the ocean. But my dear children, remember, Lo alecha hamalacha ligma, v'ein ata ben chorin lehibatel minenu. It is not expected of you to complete the entire work, but on that amount, you are not free to shirk your share. I think that's magnificent. And here you see his deep commitment and foresight, because I need not tell you, on the American scene in the 1920s, no one had a guarantee how their children would turn out. It's not like today when we have so many Torah institutions and greater success with perpetuating our traditions. I have bequeathed the portion of my estate to the Gottesman Tree of Life Association Incorporated. It is a Keren Kayemet, a permanent fund. In my last will and testament, I have detailed provision for the manner in which my bequest to the fund is to be employed and distributed. Bear in mind the provisions therein contain that should the certain institutions mentioned as the recipients of the bequest of the inheritance, should the certain institutions mentioned be dissolved, or should they cease to be strictly orthodox in character, then other orthodox institutions should be substituted in their place for like purposes and under similar conditions. This document goes on. I think it speaks for itself, and it reveals to us if I may paraphrase Mori Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik, an individual who beautifully synthesized the thesis and the antithesis, an outstanding businessman and a sensitive spiritual mind. Let me go back to how I began, mentioning that I was privileged to be one of the later of the Gottesman Fellows, and I have here a list of some of the Gottesman Fellows over the years. And I want to tell you, many of these people I knew and achieved greatness in life. Here is Rabbi Karmi Charney, Rabbi Yishmael Cohn. I can tell you when I came in Aliyah, Ish Cohn was already a well-known personality here. I believe he was in charge of Yeirut for the Misrad Datat, for the Israeli Ministry of Religion, and he was the one in charge of conversion. Rabbi Manfred Fulda, need not tell you, has taught Torah for so many years under the auspices of the yeshiva. Rabbi Melvin Granitstein, who's slightly younger than me, the only one on the list that's younger, he went on to become a very prominent rabbi in Cleveland. Rabbi Meir Carlin, that's a name no one recognizes today. He was the Muscovite Ilui, came to yeshiva in the 30s, and yeshiva was overwhelmed to have him. He was a genius, taught many years as a Rebbe in Brooklyn Talmudical Academy. Rabbi Gilbert Clapperman, the man who built Lawrence, wrote a wonderful volume on the very earliest years of the inception of the yeshiva in the late 1800s. Rabbi Norman Lamb, the third president of yeshiva, that speaks for itself. Rabbi Mendel Lewittis, who I knew so well, a member of the first graduating class of Yeshiva College, 1932, very prominent rabbi in Montreal. In his later years, came in Aliyah, and I was privileged to live in the same building with Rehovot Chaim Berlin 18 with Rabbi Mendel Lewittis. Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, Gadomi Rabban Shemo, here, Rabbi Lichtenstein, a man who had such impact on the Torah world, a giant of Torah, a giant of thought, a giant of learning, a giant of scholarship, and a giant of a fabulous human being. Rabbi Reuben Marcus, prominent rabbi, settled later in Israel, was an elegant representative of what yeshiva could produce. Rabbi Isaac Sadowski, this is the Sadowski family from Baltimore. This is the younger brother, as I recall. Gershon was the older brother. What a wonderful family, what wonderful individuals. Their father was one of the early Mismachim of the yeshiva, probably from the early 20s. And now a very famous name, Rabbi Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. No one has to elaborate on who he was. Mashgiach and Chafetz Chaim, later, or Torah, I believe, is the name of the yeshiva that he established in Israel. Rabbi Israel Vogeland, Rabbi Yasher Ziv, and it's many more names of who's who in Torah personalities. So I want to summarize, and I want to conclude quoting Reb Mendel Gottesman's, quoting something that has greatly impacted on my life. Yes, this was the individual, this was the man, 75th yahrzeit today. So much good that it continues to be done in his name and by the greater Gottesman family. And you would think for yourself, a man born so far from here, Munkac, Hungary, coming to the United States, what a successful story. What they did for Rabbi Rebbe, what they did for Yeshiva, what they did for Torah Hashem Tamima, they put it on the map in America at a time when it was very, very difficult. And even the New York Times, which over the generations has shown itself not to be a great friend of Torah people. You know who some of their editors have been, and writers, and all Jews, and find the Shomer Shabbos among them. And yet they had to wave their imaginary kippot in honor of such individuals like Mr. Mendel Gottesman. We spoke about his ethical will, the Rav describing Balabatim with that unique ability to combine the business sense acumen with the sensitive Torah heart. And let me come back what we did as Gottesman Fellows, in addition to learning and being devoted disciples, servants of what the yeshiva had to offer us. Once a year there was a Sudat Hilula on Mr. Mendel Gottesman's yahrzeit. And some of the students would speak, present the great Torah, the great ones among us. And in addition, the family would speak. And I remember participating, and I recall at least two of the sons were there. The names I recall are Mr. Herman Gottesman and Mr. Benjamin Gottesman. And one of the brothers was speaking, and he ended off quoting the following from Mr. Mendel Gottesman. Something we say in Birchat HaMazon all the time, Naha hayiti, v'gam zakanti, v'lo ra'iti tzadik me'ezol, v'zaro mevakesh lechem. I've been young, I'm old, and I haven't seen a righteous person who was forsaken and his children having to beg for bread. I've never seen it. And Mr. Gottesman asked a simple question. It's not true. We do see such individuals. We do see tzaddikim who don't have panasa. We do see tzaddikim whose families have to beg and plead for sustenance. And Mr. Gottesman answered, no, you're misinterpreting what you're saying in Birchat HaMazon. Naha yiti becomes a kanti. Loda Ida, I've been young and old and I haven't seen. You just have to add one simple thought. When it says I haven't seen, it means I haven't seen and haven't helped. Once I saw, I went on to help. And that's what Birchat HaMazon is teaching us. I think that's a beautiful interpretation. And I know over the decades and here in the state of Israel and my sheyurim and the responsibility I carry as a result, many times people approach me with difficulties, and my first thought is, how can I help? I don't just want to see difficulty, I want to help when there are such circumstances. And this I gained. I was instructed, I was directed, I was a Gottesman Fellow, and I say thank you to Mr. Mendel Gottesman. Let me just say a few words to the family. The lifestyle that we lead, at times we're amazed how we interact. Davening up the hill from my house from Mincha Marim, Baruch Hashem in Yerushalayim, there are no lack of shuls, and I have many different places to go. I befriended an individual who obviously visits Israel on occasion, and it turned out that Mr. J. Michael Gottesman is my wife's classmate from Ramaz. What a small world. His grandson, David, occasionally would come into my class when he got out of the army and he started Makol Lev, and the course was right nearby, and I got to meet that young man, a wonderful individual. And I have to admit, we have another connection which I never knew about until perhaps the last 10 years, walking through the streets of Geula in Yerushalayim, looking at a bookstore. I look for the latest volumes that have come out, and I see a volume, Yasar Yisruni Kar, from Hallel, God Has Tortured Me, But I Survived, by Yitzchak Kochanan Gibraltar of B'nai Brak, and I pick up the book, and Ani Medaf Teif, that's modern Hebrew. I flip the pages, and I see Rabbi Rebel's picture time and again. I got all excited. I bought the book on the spot, and within a few days I made a siyum. I finished it. I called the Talmud of mine at Hebrew U, who's in the field of Eastern Europe Jewish history. Who is this man who wrote the book? What is Rebel doing there? And I noticed he writes about the Calvarisky family And that brought to mind, my mother had always told me about her mother's family, Kalvarisky and Kovna, and I didn't pay attention. My mother was born in Harlem, my father was born in Harlem, and my foolish attitude was, what does my mother know about Kovna, about Europe? And I called and contacted the author. He was yet alive in his 90s. Mind was clear. And it turned out that we're all Kalvariskis. He knew my mother's family, Rabbi Rebel, and Rabbi Gibraltar, and your humble servant, Aaron Rakefet. If I'm correct, Rabbi Rebel's grandparents were my great-great-grandparents on the Kalvariski side. So I have another beautiful commitment to the Gottesman family. I have to say thank you to you as one of the few people alive who can claim blood relationship to Rabbi Dr. Dov Rebel, and I say thank you to you for helping my cousin build that great institution that we are so proud of and part of until today. Thank you very much. The neshama should have an aliyah and just nachat from future generations. Besora tovat aleinu v'al kol Yisrael.